Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video, and it's finally arrived. Ranked Solo Queue 3v3 Arena. It is coming to the Dragonflight PTR, which means that you have access to it right now if you download the public PTR, and in the future, I'm imagining it's going to be coming to the Dragonflight beta as well. In this recent round of update, we've got a lot of PvP changes and a couple of class changes to discuss, which could have huge implications on the game as a whole. And of course, if you want to stay up to date with these news and changes, entertainment and educational content, then make sure you hit the subscribe button to take advantage of it. I've had many players tell me that this content has improved their experience or increased their rating overall in World of Warcraft, and I'm currently diligently working to be the best resource to get to 100,000 subscribers is my long-term goal, and would appreciate your support in that road and that journey. So with this first update, we've got a huge discussion with ranked solo queue and how it's going to work. How are the rewards going to work? What are we going to be getting from it? And this is going to give us some answers. In Dragonflight, we are continuing our work on the solo shuffle game mode by upping the stakes and adding the ability for players to earn or lose rating, similar to our rated battlegrounds in Arena. In this week's PTR and beta build, players will be able to participate in the rated version of solo shuffle. Just like in rated BGs and arenas, you'll be able to earn seasonal rewards and achievements, credit towards vicious mounts, weekly Great Vault progress, and conquest. So it hasn't confirmed 100% is Gladiator included in this, because 2v2 has seasonal rewards but no Gladiator. I would really like for it to have its own version of Gladiator and its own version of the mount, mostly because I think that solo queue arena will just completely destroy all other team ranked modes of the game, because it is less friction, right? In order to find partners and teammates to play, that is friction you have to go through, and because that's not there and you get the same reward, path of least resistance, those brackets are going to get destroyed. The same thing happened with 5 versus 5 arena. When they removed the titles and rewards from it, everybody stopped doing it because it was just really too difficult to get 5 people together for something that doesn't give any rewards compared to the other bracket, 3 versus 3, and then 2v2 being the best bracket because it's just find one person to get your conquest is likely going to take a big hit from this, because you don't even need to find one person to queue. And I think that there is value in the team play game modes that I don't want to be completely taken away, but I do think that this should have its own version and rewards, because I really like this style of play. It's also just nice because you can log on and queue whether your friends are on or not, and I really like the other things they're doing with it, as we'll get through this post here in a moment. Solo Shuffle's rules and 6-round format continue with the addition of rating changes based off the amount of rounds each player has won during the match. We'll be monitoring and adjusting matchmaking throughout the beta to facilitate testing. One big problem I noticed in the PTR, because again, people were just like leaving, but it completely ruined it. And I noticed there was no shift in arena rating when somebody left. And I don't know if that's just because we're below 1,000 rating or what's going to go on with that, but there needs to be some really big consequences to people leaving, because you might have won 5 out of the 6 rounds and then somebody leaves in the last one, and then you're not going to get any points even though you won 5 out of 6 of the rounds. Like, there's a lot of problems there, I think, I'm not sure have been resolved. Unique to this rated game mode, players will have a rating track for each of their characters' specs. Now this is cool, which means that you could queue the solo queue as Arcane, Fire, or Frost and have 3 separate arena ratings and try and be like the #1 mage of all 3 specs. Players will select which of their specializations to queue with and participate in specialization based ladders and end of season rewards. So even though maybe the spec you like to play is not the most meta or the best spec, so it doesn't have a lot of people playing it, you'll compete in your own ladder and be like the top Arcane mage, for example, and get a reward for that, which I think is really cool to try and incentivize and also increase challenge to players to like try the other specs, because they don't have to worry about missing out on the reward if that spec is not necessarily as competitive with the other ones currently in the meta, which can create a lot of cool and unique challenges to overcome in the game. Players will also, it's also just huge replayability in the bracket, right? You get super high rated as Fire, and like I'm going to climb the ladder now as Frost, which is cool. Players will also notice that we've created a minimum item level feature for rated solo shuffle specifically, which means you're not going to be able to use this to gear up, but there still will be the unranked solo shuffle, I would imagine. So you probably use unranked solo shuffle to get honor gear, and then when you've hit the minimum level, you'll get into ranked, I'm thinking. I still think it's kind of a problem that it's not just everyone is scaled to the same item level, because we've already seen it enough in unranked solo shuffle where it's like the undergeared dude just gets one shot and everyone targets him every game, and there's nothing really that's going on in the match. So I don't know if like this minimum one is going to be, high enough. But if it's too high, then what if players can't get to that item level to be able to queue? So there's going to be some problems, I think. But we do not have it currently set to our final value for Season 1 of Dragonflight. We're extremely appreciative of all the community feedback we've received from our Brawl version of Solo Shuffle. Please continue to share your thoughts with us in the forums or at Warcraft Devs on Twitter. Please keep an eye out for future play with the Blues events focusing on Solo Shuffle on beta. So definitely make sure you download the PTR if you want to check this out, the first iteration of it. You can copy your character over. Also a good idea to start reporting some bugs, because I noticed a lot of bugs when I was on the PTR. We can all try and contribute towards making it the most insane game ever. Now we've got class changes coming in. So this most recent round of update has a couple of tuning passes, but also just a lot of honor talents, which are going to be available to all classes. So now Interlope is going to be available to all hunter specs, was Beast Mastery only, which was kind of like a misdirect to your pet. I don't really see this honor talent ever getting play as Beast Mastery, let alone even the other hunter specs, which is kind of disappointing. Diamond Dice is now available to all hunter specs, not only survival. So against teams where your freezing trap might break, or there's an imp to dispel it, or a lot of mass dispel effects, you can actually get Diamond Dice as Beast Mastery or as Marksman, which could definitely see some play. Beast Mastery is also receiving Kindred Beast redesigned to work with Tenacity Pet's new ability, Fortitude of the Bear. While using a Tenacity Pet, command Pet's unique ability cooldown reduced by 50%, and allies within 20 yards of your pet gain 10% increased maximum health. So like you can pick like a defensive oriented pet towards like a mini battle master. Tenacity Pet is usually only selected when you know your pet's going to be targeted, and it's like very specific. I really only seen one hunter ever try and do a Tenacity Pet in PvP. This gives it a little bit more flavor and usability, whereas like the other pet was the Roar of Sacrifice effect, and you kind of always needed it. So interested to see if this gets any play. Monk is getting a lot of updates for their honor talents. Grapple weapon available to Brewmaster, not really a big deal, but the mighty Ox Kick is now available for all monk specs. And if you don't know what this is, it's literally like a backflip kick that frying pans somebody 40 yards behind you, which is now available to Mistweaver and Windwalker. So it's a really fun ability that only Brewmaster had, and now all of the monk specs are going to be getting it. Definitely worth checking out. Dematerialize now for Brewmaster. Alpha Tiger is now only going to be 20% haste, down from 30 after using Tiger Palm, because it's now going to be available for all monk specialization. So big boost of haste as a Mistweaver. If you want to do some fist weaving, some melee damage, getting in with an Alpha Tiger and maybe some of the new talents now as well, synergizing, could definitely give you some options for offensive Mistweaver play. Wind Waker now available for Brewmaster. For Paladin, also some really big changes. Hallowed Ground available for Retribution. This was the like cleansing freedom effect from Consecrate, and it seems like they want to have an emphasis on Consecrate for Paladin and Dragonflight. So having this effect on a Consecrate build Paladin could maybe be possible in PvP. Probably going to be more frustrating than anything else. Aura of Reckoning, which is when an enemy crits you, you get a stack. When at 50 stacks, it activates Avenging Wrath. It's now available for all Paladin specs. But for Holy Paladin, it's going to be the spells empower your next judgment once it gets to 50 stacks. So big damage judges are getting even bigger for Holy Paladins with this talent. Vengeance Aura is now available for all Paladin specs, and I'm not 100% sure what the current iteration of Vengeance Aura was, because before it was like increased your damage when someone got CC'd. I don't think that's what it is right now, but if this has big implications, you're a Holy Paladin player, definitely let me know in the comments down below. And Divine Favor has been removed from the PvP talents, moved to the talent tree. This is an important point to note because Divine Favor got gutted from the game. I'll scroll up to it here in the class changes for Paladin specifically, but right here, Divine Favor has been moved from PvP talents to the Holy Talent tree. No longer provides immunity to interrupts, and now increases healing by 60%, up from 40, but its cooldown was also nerfed to 45 seconds. And this is the big downside. You know, you might have been thinking like, oh, it's really good that the honor talent is now a normal talent, because that means I get to choose other honor talents. But what has happened historically in the past when they've taken an honor talent and made it into a talent available for the rest of the game is that they have to balance it around the rest of the game, and when they balance it around the rest of the game, it's destroyed in PvP. This happened with Way of the Crane. This happened with Avenging Crusader for Paladin, and this is now happening for Divine Favor. So the effects that made this really powerful in PvP and desirable and helped you in situations as a Holy Paladin is now gone because it needs to be balanced in the rest of the game. So this is a huge like precedent moment here that needs to be pointed out, because this could happen to any other talents. This could happen to Lightning Lasso if it's too powerful in PvE for Shamans, because now it's available in all content, right? For example, so this is a big concern. Like a big red flag has popped up for this. I'm keeping my eyes out on any changes like this moving into the future. And again, if you want to stay up to date and make sure you're not missing any of those, then make sure you're subscribed. And these are things that I want to like point out with feedback, because like now this core mechanic for Paladin is basically out of the game in PvP, and it's just like an extra healing cooldown in PvE. So I'm honestly kind of disappointed with that. Now we scroll down to the rest of the PvP updates here. For Rogue, Dagger in the Dark now available for all specs is going to affect Ambush. There's a lot of Ambush builds that I've seen, mostly for Outlaw. So these Dagger in the Dark talent could maybe have some really powerful like opener damage, similar to like Wrath of Lich King almost, in terms of Ambush. For Warlock, Call Observer is now available. This thing has not done any damage in PvP for a long time unless it's bugged and one-shots me as Boomkin. So even though this is available for all locks, like it's just pathetically low damage compared to where it was in Legion, that it's not even like, it used to be a thorns for spellcasters. You had to be aware of it, either stop casting or target it down and focus fire it. Had some nice kind of interactions with gameplay there, but the way that it's been tuned is that it just doesn't do anything, or it's bugged and it one-shots people sometimes. So it's not really a big deal. Bonds of Fel is now available for all Warlock specs. Having Fire School, I believe it is Fire School, not Chaos, as Affliction. So you've got another spell you can cast if you're interrupted. Could be really good. Something to consider, but you also do have a lot of other really important honor talents that you might not be able to slot this one in. Warrior Rebound is now available for all Warrior specs. Reflected spells now cost 50% extra damage to the attacker, up from 33%. So if you see a giant glacial spike coming your way, you spell reflect that bad boy, you probably one-shotting the Frost Mage. This could be really funny. I don't know if it'll be in competitive arena, but it's definitely a funny one. Battle Trance has been redesigned. It's just to include their abilities interacting with the Battle Trance effect for Fury, and that pretty much concludes the honor talent changes portion of this. Some of the big class ones that I wanted to talk about coming through here are that they're pretty much settled in on talent trees for Arms Warrior, it looks like, or pretty close to it, but they've decided to remove Skull Banner. So if you were excited about Skull Banner making a return, it's not. Skull Banner is not coming into this iteration of Dragonflight unless it pops up again. Maybe it will, but it seems like they don't want to. That was one big one. We talked about the Divine Favor one. The next big one is that Surrender to Madness. As soon as I can find it, we saw a bunch of nerfs to Shadow Priest, honestly, in PvP. Things like Damnation having its cooldown increased, which is the ability to instantly apply all your dots. Void Torrent also having its cooldown increased, but it's damage buffed, so I don't know if that's a nerf overall for you or not. But Surrender to Madness has been removed. So Megalomania, Surrender to Madness, all of that type of stuff. I'm not sure how that's all going to end up working out, or if it's just all going to get removed. But that was a big change incoming for Shadow Priest. And there was a recent big change for Priest as a whole that I'm going to be talking about here now just in a moment. I just want to scroll this and make sure that I did miss anything specifically. The instant Vivify talent for monks is now going to have a cooldown of 10 seconds, which was a big one that was really overpowered. Being able to just instantly spam Vivifies with no cooldown. So I'm glad that has come through and is going to be making a hit here. Frosty K got a bunch of buffs and rearrangements of its talents. I'm really happy about Frosty K getting some attention here on this recent round of updates. And now finally we've got like the priest section of this. They talked about having too many active spells for priest, which is very concerning. Because of the things that they're choosing to remove. So they've brought Flash Heal back, but now they've realized having Shadow Mend and Flash Heal is kind of redundant. But they're deciding to remove Shadow Mend and keep Flash Heal, which means as a Disc Priest, you are really not going to be happy about this, because this means you're losing your secondary school of magic when you're casting. This is going to be a huge hit for you. And they're also talking about removing Mind Games, and Power Word Life is contributing number of active spells for priests. So Mind Games is a really fun one. Would be sad to see this one go. Power Word Life, honestly, I don't really care if this one goes. It's just another lay on hands effect, and I don't think the game needs more of those. So I would actually be happy if that one went. But if Mind Games ended up leaving, I would be really disappointed. For Discipline, they talk about wanting to improve build diversity. So whether you want to be like a Power Word Shield Priest or a Penance Priest or whatever type of spell you want to focus on, they seem to be happy with Renew and Power Word Shield, the way that they've left themselves. And they talk about how they're choosing to remove Surrender to Madness. They talk about Void Eruption and how they want to try and balance it against some of the new and returning talents and incorporating Mind Spike. I think Mind Spike now got an update where it's not going to remove dots, which is really awesome. They talk about how they don't want to add silence baseline to priests, because there was complaints made about priests not having any interrupts in PvE. And then they say because of PvP, they don't want them to have silence, but they're giving priests root. And it's kind of just like, I feel like there's some inconsistencies here in terms of like, they don't want them to have a silence, and they don't want them to have a knockback because other classes have knockbacks, but they're giving them a root when other classes have roots. And it's like, where's the logic in between what crowd controls should some classes have and other ones shouldn't? Because you're going to be losing Shining Force, which is your knockback in the next expansion, and they didn't want you to get Spectral Guides because they don't want priests going into stealth, as other classes already have so many different stealth effects. So it seems like there's a little bit of inconsistencies in terms of the logic for me as to whether or not like a certain utility is based on a certain class or spec. Like all shamans are getting knockbacks, and then when I was playing the PTR solo queue, like I got knocked Thunderstorm by a Resto Shaman, and I for a second had to be like, why I just got knocked back by a Resto Shaman. So there's kind of a weird juggling of spells and utility going on, and I'm not sure if it's going to end up landing where or landing and hitting the mark necessarily. And also then they talk about how things like the resurrection effect, where when you go into the angel and then you res afterwards, is not good for PvP, but they're keeping it in the game. So it's like, you don't think it's good that priests have a knockback in PvP, so you're going to remove it, but then you don't think this is good, but you're going to keep it. Like, it just doesn't seem very consistent with these effects. And this is kind of the trouble with trying to balance the game around World of Warcraft as a whole, rather than having separate avenues for even Mythic Plus balancing compared to Raid and Arena to Battlegrounds and stuff like that, where when you've got an effect that overlaps across all domains, so this effect is really fun and awesome in PvE, but then in PvP it's not, or in PvP it's too overpowered, so it can't exist in PvE where it would be fun. And you've got this huge problem, and then there's inconsistencies like this, and I don't really know how to solve them. The way that they've outlined this Resurrection Legendary, which is a really big one, I don't want this one coming forward, is that it's a choice node that competes with double Serenity charges. So giving up that throughput for Res Legendary is going to be a big choice, but again, that really depends on tuning. If you don't need the second Serenity charge, then it's probably not a big deal. And also, what's going to happen to that? Because that Serenity charge used to be an honor talent. Are they going to nerf it into the ground where it's just not useful anymore because it's too powerful in PvE? Like, what's going to go on there? So this is kind of the first update where I've started to have some concerns. Very excited for the ranked solo queue update, but there are definitely concerns now, as it seems like they're backpedaling a little bit on returning abilities and pruning things down, and what things are they choosing to prune away and what ones aren't they choosing, that I really want to keep my eyes on moving forward. Give feedback as much as possible. Let me know what you think in the comments down below with this recent rounded update. Do you think that this is going the wrong direction? Like, is it too much? I personally would prefer if Dragonflight was delayed and we just kind of chilled with Wrath of the Lich King in the season 4 of Shadowlands a little bit longer to make sure that all this is concretely locked in, because I would hate for it to come through and be like, well, now we can't do anything about it until the next expansion or something, if one of these things ends up just not working out very well. But other than that, thank you very much for watching the video, and I will catch you in the next one.